Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
You are now listening to Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting Indigenous peoples across the globe. This September edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central, and South America, Africa, Asia, and beyond. Starting news from USA. Navajo, Hopi, and San Juan Southern Paiute leaders met with senior officials from the U.S. Department of the Interior and Bureau of Reclamation on September 4 to push for a historic water rights settlement in Arizona. The meeting, hosted by Navajo Nation President Bu Niggrain and a speaker, Crystalline Carley, also included Hopi Tribal Chairman Timothy Nuvangwama and San Juan Southern Paiute President Carlene Aloher. The proposed Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Agreement aims to resolve legal disputes and secure long-term water access for three tribes. Leaders urged federal support for the settlement, with a speaker Corley emphasizing that many Navajo communities have waited generations for reliable clean water. The agreement would allocate specific water rights to the Navajo Nation from the Colorado and Little Colorado rivers, as well as local aquifers. Tribal officials emphasized the need for federal support to secure approval of the settlement by Congress and its implementation. In Canada, a historic court ruling on August 29, 2025 marked a significant victory for Indigenous land rights in Canada. The Haluci Nation won a land title case over property in Richmond, British Columbia, marking only the second time Aboriginal title has been legally recognized on non-reserved land. The British Columbia Supreme Court decision, which concluded Canada's longest-running trial at 513 days, builds on a lineage of landmark cases, including the 1997 Delmuk ruling and the 2014 Chicot indecision. TLSCO Chief Francis Leakey noted that the Chilcote and victory inspired Indigenous nations worldwide to defend their lands, while the British Columbia Attorney General is appealing the decision, and nearby nations are reviewing legal opposition due to overlapping claims. The ruling affirms that Indigenous people hold rights to the land itself and that their oral histories are valid evidence in Canadian courts. The victory is seen as a crucial step towards recognizing Indigenous sovereignty and traditional ways of life. In Australia, a far-right march against immigration escalated into a violent attack on a sacred Aboriginal site in Melbourne, leaving 4 people injured. The March for Australia protest, led by members of the neo-Nazi National Socialist Network, culminated in a group of 50 men storming Camp Sovereignty, a historic Indigenous burial ground. The attackers, armed with poles and pipes, charged the camp, tearing down First Nation flags and damaging the site. 2 people were hospitalized for severe head wounds. Video footage shows attackers specifically targeting women and chanting quote-unquote white power. Critics are questioning the police response as officers reportedly arrived after the attackers fled and made no arrests at the scene. The attack has been widely condemned by Aboriginal leaders who are calling for a full investigation into what they consider a racially motivated hate crime. Now news from Africa. In South Africa, Indigenous Khoisan leaders are raising serious concerns over their marginalization in a national convention meant to foster their inclusion. The three-day all-inclusive meeting held mid-February in Gauteng and convened by Cooperative Governance Minister Velenkosini Lavisa aimed to amplify fragmented Khoi and San communities into a single voice and chart a path forward formal recognitions within South Africa's traditional leadership structures. However, Khoi San leaders in August 2025 came out to say they were sidelined, describing the consultative process as overly rigid and not reflective of their traditional practices. They claim the recognition criteria imposed by Commission on Khoi San Matters lack fairness and could hinder their representation alongside other ethnic groups. Likewise, hundreds of members of the Khoi and San communities marched to Parliament in Cape Town on 4 September, demanding formal recognition as South Africa's first indigenous people. The demonstrators representing the National Khoi San March for Freedom handed over a memorandum calling for the revocations of the Traditional and Khoi San Leadership Act, which they say fails to truly represent their identity and rights. Their demands include immediate legislative and policy reforms, particularly the restoration of ancestral land rights. Leaders also announced plans to hold a National Khoi San Convention later this month to consolidate their position and intensify their advocacy. The protest highlights growing frustration over what community representatives see as the continued marginalization of indigenous voices in national law and policy. In Morocco, a cultural renaissance is sweeping across Morocco as Amazigh, also known as Berber heritage, surges into national prominence. Once sidelined, the indigenous Amazigh people are reclaiming the spotlight with renewed vigor. Since ascending the throne in 1999, King Muhammad VI, whose mother was of Amazigh descent, has promoted Amazigh culture as counterbalance to Pan-Arab narratives. This led to the establishment of Royal Institute of Amazigh Culture in 2001, tasked with the codifying Tamazight, preserving the Tifinagh script, and integrating Tamazight presence in schools and media. In 2011, Tamazight gained constitutional recognition as an official language, elevating its status nationwide. Meanwhile, the Royal Institute of Tamazight Culture became a key resource, publishing language textbooks, producing media content, and championing cultural research. Now, news from Asia. News from Philippines. The Philippines has been identified as the deadliest country in Asia for land and environmental defenders, according to the new report by advocacy groups Pan-Asia Pacific. The Land and Rights Watch report, said to be released soon, found the Philippines had the highest number of land conflict-related killings on the continent in 2025. Pan-Asia Pacific documented 6 separate incidents, resulting in 9 deaths last year. The report also detailed 10 cases of arrest and illegal persecution affecting 41 individuals, along with 9 instances of threats and physical assaults. Arnold Padilla, Deputy Executive Director of Pan-Asia Pacific, stated the figures contradict the Philippine government's claim of upholding human rights. He attributed the violence to the government's counterinsurgency campaigns, which often involve raid-tagging activists, thereby endangering civilians. In Nepal, a formal complaint has been lodged with the Compliance Advisor Ombudsman against the International Finance Corporations regarding its involvement in the IME cable car projects in Nepal. The Lawyers Association for Human Rights of Nepalese indigenous peoples, representing the indigenous Limbu Yaktum Nation, filed the complaint on August 26, 2025. The complaint targeting IFC Advisory Project alleges the project poses irreversible threat to Mukumlung, a sacred site of profound spiritual and cultural significance to the Limbu indigenous peoples. According to the complaint, the project violates indigenous rights by proceeding without free, prior, and informed consent. The Limbu Nation asserts that the cable car threatens their ancestral lands, environment, and right to self-determination. Lahornip, with support from Asia Indigenous Peoples Network on Extractive Industries and Energy and Resource, holds a decision-making authority to ensure the affected communities' voices are central to the process. Similarly, fears are escalating in Nepal after security forces fired on anti-government protesters, leaving at least 22 people dead. The majority of the casualties occurred on September 8 when troops used live ammunition and rubber bullets against young demonstrators. Following a day of a calm, soldiers and heavily armed police were deployed in Kathmandu, raising concerns of another violent class. The UN and human rights groups have condemned the use of lethal force, calling for a swift investigation. Historically, Nepal's security forces have rarely faced accountability for their actions. This history of impunity, according to the experts, contributes to a deep-seated fear of authority among the public. The international community is closely watching to see if the government holds its forces responsible. In Bangladesh, for centuries, the indigenous Khasi people in Bangladesh have relied on traditional forest-based agroforestry, spatially cultivating betel leaf to sustain their livelihoods. However, these age-old practices are now under threat due to the escalating effects of climate change. Erratic rainfall and prolonged droughts are significantly reducing harvests, causing economic hardships for the community. In response, some Khasis are exploring crop diversification, including planting coffee to supplement their income and maintain their connection to the forest. They are also advocating for international recognition of their conservation efforts. The community hopes to gain access to REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradations, financial incentives similar to a program in India's Meghalaya. This support could provide crucial funding to help them continue their vital role in protecting these forests. Now, news from Latin and South America. In Guatemala, a Guatemalan judge has ordered Esteban Tocchi, a former deputy mayor of indigenous municipality of Solola, to stand trial on 5 charges, including sedition and terrorism, while granting him conditional freedom. The public prosecutor's office accuses him of unlawful association, sedition, terrorism, obstruction of criminal proceedings, and obstruction of justice. The court's decision follows a hearing of over 7 hours, during which Toc's defense team argued the case lacked merit. Prior to the hearing, Toc called the proceedings a blow to the Mayan people. His case has raised concerns about criminalization of indigenous authorities, with a peaceful demonstration demanding his and other indigenous leaders' release taking place on the day of the hearing. In Brazil, hundreds of indigenous women protested in Brasilia for the 4th year in a row, demanding an end to gender violence in their communities and better access to reproductive health services. According to Chief Juma Sipaia, a national secretary for the coordination and promotion of indigenous rights, femicides have risen sharply, with violence against women worsening in indigenous territories across Brazil. The protest also targeted a proposed bill that would weaken environmental permitting for construction projects, which critics say would worsen deforestation and climate change. The protest highlights the intersecting struggle of indigenous women for safety, health, and environmental protection. In Argentina, indigenous women in Argentina have organized a protest march to raise awareness about the environmental threats posed by mining projects. The Women's Walk in Defense of Pachamama brought together communities, indigenous peoples, and general public during the 2nd week of August. The protest aims to protect Laguna de Poguilos, a crucial wetland, from the risks associated with advancing mining operations. An organizer, a young woman from the Pune region, called on a fellow youth to join the protest, stating, quote, "We want to prevent foreign companies from taking our natural resources and leaving us polluted and in poverty," unquote. The march highlights the community's fight to defend their territories and natural resources. In Peru, the Federation of Quechua, Chacuta, Amazon Indigenous Peoples has rejected a recent court decision that revokes a prior ruling on the demarcation of their ancestral lands. The territories located in Peru overlap with protected natural areas, a situation that has historically limited the Quechua people's autonomy and traditional subsistence activities. Federation of Quechua, Chacuta, Amazon Indigenous Peoples denounces the new ruling as a violation of their collective rights and a setback to their legal struggle for full territorial recognition. The organization asserts that the decision disregards ILO Convention No. 169, which mandates states to respect the land ownership of indigenous peoples. The Quechua community continues to demand recognition and respect for their rights over their ancestral lands. In Ecuador, Ecuador's Haku Amazon Foundations, led by young Quechua indigenous women, has been awarded the prestigious 2025 Equatorial Prize by the United Nations Development Program. Honored in a Nature for Climate Actions category, the prize recognizes the Foundation's innovative work in promoting sustainable development and ecological resilience. The Foundation was chosen from over 700 projects in 103 countries for its commitment to climate justice, gender equality, and self-determination of indigenous peoples. Key initiatives include Yuturi Warmi, a female-led territorial guard, and Hako Amazon Daising, a social enterprise that empowers women through the sale of crafts. The award celebrates the effectiveness of indigenous-led solutions in fight against climate change. In Nicaragua, a new report by the Legal Defense Unit and the Legal Assistance Center for Indigenous Peoples reveals a platform of systematic persecution against Nicaragua's Maigna and Miskito peoples. The document, titled Ethnocide and Symbolic Extermination, denounces that the current regime uses arbitrary detentions and other abuses to punish indigenous communities for defending their ancestral lands. The report meticulously documents a range of violent actions, including arrest by elite forces, forced disappearances, and racially motivated torture. Furthermore, it details trials that lack legal guarantees and the transfer of detainees to remote prisons. Denounced practices include electrocution, severe beatings, and prolonged isolation, as well as denial of traditional food and medicine. This report highlights the profound toll that political imprisonment is taking on indigenous communities, exposing a troubling campaign of repression against those who protect their heritage. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky.